I bet you didn't know the true cost of desperation.
Empty pockets, gnawing hunger. The city pressed in, a suffocating weight on my chest. I was drowning in my own life, a life of abandoned dreams and relentless bills.
Then, a lifeline. A ramshackle house, rent impossibly low, nestled amongst the silent stones of an ancient graveyard. The house stood alone, shrouded in perpetual twilight by the looming oaks that guarded the graveyard's edge. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and forgotten things, but it was shelter. It was a chance.
I took the job at the local diner, flipping burgers and pouring coffee for weary travelers. The pay was meager, barely enough to keep me afloat, but it was something. I clung to that something, a fragile raft in a sea of despair.
He ate sparingly, his meals stolen moments between customers. Sleep came in snatches, haunted by the rustling of leaves against his window pane, leaves that seemed to whisper his name. He told himself it was the wind. He told himself he was just tired. Days bled into weeks, a monotonous rhythm of work and sleep punctuated by the chirp of the diner's ancient cash register. The sound was a constant reminder of the passage of time, each ring marking another moment lost to the mundane. The diner, with its faded wallpaper and worn-out booths, seemed to exist in a time loop, where nothing ever changed, and yet everything felt different. The house remained eerily still during the day. It was as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to break the silence. The long shadows cast by the sun created an illusion of movement, making the empty rooms feel alive with unseen presences. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind through the cracks, added to the sense of unease that permeated the air. Sunlight, hesitant to penetrate the oppressive canopy, painted the dusty rooms in shades of grey. The light struggled to break through, casting eerie patterns on the walls and floors. It was a battle between light and darkness, with the latter always seeming to have the upper hand. The rooms, filled with old furniture and forgotten memories, felt like a snapshot from a bygone era, frozen in time.
I grew accustomed to the silence, the constant presence of the graves just beyond my doorstep. The graveyard became a part of my daily life, a silent companion that watched over me. Each headstone told a story, each name a reminder of the fragility of life. I found myself drawn to the quiet, the stillness, the sense of peace that seemed to emanate from the graves. I learned to ignore the feeling of unseen eyes watching me, the prickle of gooseflesh on the back of my neck when I turned a corner too quickly. It was a sensation that never truly went away, a constant reminder that I was never really alone. The shadows seemed to move with a life of their own, and the wind carried whispers that I could never quite make out. I told myself it was just my imagination. I tried to rationalize the feelings, to convince myself that there was nothing to fear. But deep down, I knew that something was not right. The graveyard held secrets, and I was slowly becoming a part of its story.
He began to find a strange solace in the graveyard. The quiet, the solitude, the sense of being surrounded by history, all combined to create a feeling of peace that he had never known before. It was as if the weight of the world lifted from his shoulders and he could finally breathe. The quiet hum of the wind through the headstones was oddly calming. It was a sound that spoke of eternity, of the endless cycle of life and death. The leaves rustled softly, as if whispering secrets to the stones, and the air was filled with a sense of timelessness. He would spend his evenings walking the paths, reading the names etched in stone, imagining the lives lived and lost. Each headstone was a window into the past, a glimpse into the stories of those who had come before. He felt a connection to these strangers, a sense of kinship that transcended time and space.
I started talking to myself, whispering stories to the silent stones. It was a way to fill the silence, to give voice to the thoughts and feelings that I could not share with anyone else. The gravestones became my confidants, my silent listeners, and I found comfort in their presence. I told them of my dreams, my fears, my loneliness. I shared my hopes and my regrets, my triumphs and my failures. The graveyard became a sanctuary, a place where I could be myself without fear of judgment. The wind seemed to listen, carrying my words away into the gathering darkness. It was as if the graveyard itself was absorbing my pain, my sorrow, and offering me a sense of solace in return. The rustling leaves and the whispering wind became a part of my nightly ritual, a reminder that I was not alone. I told myself I was just lonely. I told myself I was going crazy, but deep down, I knew that the graveyard had become a part of me, and I a part of it. The uneasy peace I found there was both a comfort and a curse, a reminder of the thin line between the living and the dead.
The wind shifted one night, twisting into something colder, sharper. It was as if the very essence of the night had changed, bringing with it an unsettling chill that crept into every corner of the house. It clawed at Ethan's windows, rattling the loose panes in their frames. The sound was relentless, a constant reminder of the storm's fury outside. He pulled the blankets tighter around himself, his heart pounding a frantic tattoo against his ribs. Each gust of wind seemed to echo his heartbeat, amplifying his growing sense of dread.
Sleep, when it finally came, was a restless thing. I tossed and turned, my mind unable to find peace. The shadows in the room seemed to dance and shift, playing tricks on my weary eyes. I dreamt of cold hands reaching for me, of whispers that slithered into my ears, promising oblivion. The voices were insistent, their words a jumbled mess of threats and promises that I couldn't quite understand.
He woke with a gasp, the feeling of unseen eyes burning into him. The room was still, but the sense of being watched was overwhelming, as if something malevolent lurked just out of sight. The room was ice cold, the air thick with a cloying metallic scent. It was a smell that brought to mind old, forgotten places, filled with decay and despair. He could hear the wind howling outside, but it was different now. It carried with it a sense of foreboding, a promise of something dark and terrible. It was laced with a sound he couldn't quite place, a low, mournful moan that seemed to seep into his bones. It was a sound that spoke of ancient sorrows and unending grief.
I got out of bed, my bare feet sinking into the threadbare rug. The floor was cold, the chill seeping up through the thin fabric and into my bones. The floorboards creaked beneath my weight as I walked to the window. Each step seemed to echo in the silence, a reminder of how alone I was in that moment. I peered out into the darkness, but the shadows held their secrets close. The night was impenetrable, a black void that seemed to swallow all light and hope. I told myself it was just the wind. I told myself I was just imagining things. But the fear was real, a living thing that gnawed at my insides.
But deep down, a seed of fear began to blossom in his chest. It was a fear that whispered of things unseen, of dangers lurking just beyond the edge of perception. It was the first whisper of terror, a prelude to the horrors yet to come. Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, head in hands, trying to steady his breathing. The room felt oppressive, the air thick with an unnameable dread. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second dragging on, amplifying the silence that filled the room. Time seemed to stretch, each moment an eternity of fear and uncertainty. He glanced at the mirror, his reflection staring back at him with wide, fearful eyes. The face in the mirror looked haunted, a reflection of the terror that gripped his heart. Gathering his courage, Ethan decided to investigate. He walked down the dark hallway, the shadows seeming to close in around him. Each step was a battle against the fear that threatened to paralyze him. His hand reached for the doorknob, hesitating for a moment before turning it. The door creaked open, revealing the dark, empty room beyond. He stood in the doorway, peering into the darkness. The room was empty, but the sense of foreboding was palpable, as if something unseen was watching him from the shadows. Ethan listened intently, straining to hear any sound that might betray the presence of something sinister. But the house was silent, the only sound the distant howl of the wind. He closed the door quietly, trying not to make a sound. The fear was still there, a constant companion, but he forced himself to move, to keep searching for the source of his unease. As he walked back to his bed, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He glanced over his shoulder nervously, but the hallway was empty, the shadows still and silent. Lying back down, he pulled the blankets up to his chin, his eyes wide open in fear. The night stretched on, filled with the whispers of terror that promised more to come. Lost to the shadows. In the depths of the night, where the moonlight barely pierces through the thick canopy of clouds, lies a place forgotten by time. a place where shadows dance and whispers linger, a place where the living seldom tread.
The line between reality and nightmare blurred. It was as if I was trapped in a perpetual twilight, where the boundaries of my mind and the world around me dissolved into an indistinguishable haze. Every corner I turned, every shadow I saw, seemed to be a fragment of a dream I couldn't wake up from. I couldn't remember the last time I'd eaten, the last time I'd spoken to another human being. Days, weeks, perhaps even months had melded into one long, unending night. The isolation was suffocating yet oddly comforting. The silence was my only companion, the darkness my only friend. The house seemed to close in around me, a suffocating embrace of cold stone and rotting wood. The walls, once sturdy and protective, now felt like a prison, their decaying structure a testament to the passage of time and the weight of forgotten memories. Each creak and groan of the old wood was a reminder of my own fragility.
Ethan, come to us. The voice was soft, almost tender, yet it carried an undeniable weight of authority. It was a call I had heard many times before, a call that resonated deep within my soul, pulling me towards the unknown. We promise you peace, we offer you release. The words were like a balm to my weary spirit, a promise of respite from the endless torment of my existence. They spoke of a place where pain and suffering were but distant memories, where I could finally find the solace I so desperately craved.
One night, the whispers coalesced into a single voice, a chillingly familiar voice that promised me peace, that offered me release. It was a voice from my past, a voice that had once brought me comfort and joy, now twisted and distorted by the shadows that surrounded me. I looked at my reflection in the cracked mirror and saw only emptiness staring back. The person I once was had long since vanished, replaced by a hollow shell, a mere echo of my former self. The cracks in the mirror seemed to mirror the fractures in my own soul, each one a testament to the pain and loss I had endured. I walked out of the house and into the graveyard, the wind whipping at my clothes, urging me forward. The path was familiar, yet each step felt like a journey into the unknown. The gravestones, worn and weathered by time, stood as silent sentinels, bearing witness to my passage. I no longer felt the cold. The chill that once bit at my skin now seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a numbness that permeated my very being. The graveyard, once a place of fear and dread, now felt like a sanctuary, a place where I could finally find peace. I no longer felt fear. The shadows that once haunted my every step now seemed like old friends, their presence a comforting reminder that I was not alone. The darkness, once a source of terror, now felt like a warm embrace, a place where I could finally be myself. I felt only a strange sense of belonging, a yearning to be one with the shadows that danced among the headstones. The graveyard, with its silent inhabitants and whispering winds, felt like home. It was a place where I could finally find the peace I had been searching for, a place where I could finally rest.
Yes, Ethan, come home. The voice was insistent yet gentle, a siren call that I could no longer resist. It was a call to return to the place where I truly belonged, a place where I could finally find peace.
I closed my eyes as the wind swirled around me, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and forgotten things. The air was thick with the scent of decay and the promise of renewal, a reminder that even in death there is life. The wind seemed to whisper secrets of the past, tales of those who had come before me and found their own peace among the shadows. I took a deep breath and let the darkness claim me, my laughter echoing through the graveyard, a chilling counterpoint to the mournful sigh of the wind. I was home. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of relief, a release from the burdens that had weighed me down for so long. The shadows embraced me, and I embraced them in return, finding solace in their cold, comforting presence. The graveyard, with its silent whispers and dancing shadows, was no longer a place of fear, but a place of peace. I had finally found my home among the shadows.
The air grew colder as the night deepened. Shadows danced on the walls, whispering secrets of the past. The house seemed to breathe, its wooden floors creaking under the weight of unseen footsteps. Every corner held a story, every silence a scream. The haunting had only just begun. It was as if the house itself was alive, a sentient entity that thrived on the fear and despair of those who dared to enter its decaying halls. The walls, once silent and still, now seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, each creak and groan a testament to the restless spirits that called this place home. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling the air with a cacophony of voices. They spoke of betrayal and loss, of love turned to hatred, of lives cut short by tragedy. Each word was a dagger, piercing through the veil of time and space, dragging me deeper into the abyss of my own mind. I felt a presence behind me, a cold, clammy hand resting on my shoulder. I turned, but there was nothing there, only the empty air and the shadows that seemed to mock my fear. The house was playing with me, testing my resolve, pushing me to the brink of madness. The floorboards creaked under my weight as I moved through the darkened rooms, each step a journey into the unknown. The air was thick with the scent of decay and the promise of something far worse. The darkness seemed to close in around me, a suffocating shroud that threatened to consume me whole. And then I saw it. A figure, barely visible in the dim light, standing at the end of the hallway. It was a shape I recognized, a face I had seen countless times in my nightmares. It was me. Or rather, a twisted, distorted version of myself, a reflection of the darkness that had taken root in my soul. The figure moved closer, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It reached out a hand, beckoning me to join it in the shadows. I felt a pull, a magnetic force drawing me towards the darkness, but this time I resisted. I would not let the house claim me, not yet. The whispers turned to screams, the shadows writhed and twisted, and the house seemed to shake with rage. But I stood my ground, refusing to be consumed by the darkness. The figure faded, the whispers died down, and the house fell silent once more. I knew then that the haunting was far from over. The house had shown me a glimpse of its true power, a taste of the terror that lay in wait. But I was not defeated. I would face the darkness, confront the shadows, and find a way to break free from the grip of the haunted house. The night was still, the air cold and heavy with the promise of more horrors to come, but for now I had won a small victory. The haunting had only just begun, but I was ready. I would face whatever came next, and I would not be afraid. The air grew colder as the night deepened. Shadows danced on the walls, whispering secrets of the past. The house seemed to breathe, its wooden floors creaking under the weight of unseen footsteps. Every corner held a story, every silence a scream. The haunting had only just begun. A pause 3S, the lullaby of shadows. In the dead of night, a faint melody echoed through the halls. It was a lullaby sung by a voice long forgotten. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick with dread. Each step taken was a step deeper into the unknown. The house was alive, and it was watching. The melody was hauntingly familiar, a song from a distant past that I could not quite place. It floated through the air, wrapping around me like a shroud. The lullaby was both soothing and terrifying, a juxtaposition of comfort and fear. As I followed the sound, the walls seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm, each note vibrating through the very structure of the house. The shadows danced more fervently, as if the music had given them life. I could feel eyes upon me, unseen but unmistakable, tracking my every move. The air grew colder still, each breath a visible puff in the dim light. I rounded a corner and found myself in a room I had not seen before. It was a child's room, untouched by time. Toys lay scattered on the floor, a dusty cradle stood in the corner, and a music box sat on a small table, its lid open, playing the eerie lullaby. The voice grew louder, more distinct. It was a woman's voice, filled with sorrow and longing. The words of the lullaby became clearer, speaking of lost love and eternal rest. I felt a chill run down my spine as the realization dawned on me. This was the voice of a mother, forever searching for her lost child. I approached the music box, my hand trembling as I reached out to close it. The moment my fingers touched the lid, the music stopped, and the room fell into an oppressive silence. The temperature dropped even further, and I could see my breath forming in the air. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. I was trapped. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows growing darker and more menacing. The lullaby began again, this time louder and more insistent. It was no longer a song of sorrow, but a command, a call to join the darkness. I felt a presence in the room, the same cold, clammy hand resting on my shoulder. But this time I did not turn. I knew what awaited me in the shadows. I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to give in to the darkness. The voice grew louder, more demanding, but I stood my ground. I would not be lured into the shadows. The air was thick with dread, but I forced myself to breathe, to focus on the reality of the room around me. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the music stopped. The door creaked open, and the oppressive weight lifted. I was free, but I knew that the house was not done with me. The lullaby was a warning, a promise of the horrors yet to come. I stepped out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. The house was alive and it was watching, but I was ready. I would face the darkness, confront the shadows, and find a way to break free from the grip of the haunted house. The night was still, the air cold and heavy with the promise of more horrors to come. But for now I had won a small victory. The haunting had only just begun, but I was ready. I would face whatever came next, and I would not be afraid. In the dead of night, a faint melody echoed through the halls. It was a lullaby sung by a voice long forgotten. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick with dread. Each step taken was a step deeper into the unknown. The house was alive and it was watching. Echoes of betrayal. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. They spoke of betrayal, of love lost and promises broken. The air was thick with the scent of decay, the walls stained with memories of the past. The house was a tomb, and its secrets were buried deep within its walls. As I moved through the darkened corridors, the whispers seemed to follow me, growing louder and more accusatory with each step. They were voices of the forgotten, the betrayed, and the forsaken. I could feel their pain, their anger, as if it were my own. The very air seemed to vibrate with their sorrow, each breath a struggle against the weight of their despair. The walls were covered in old, peeling wallpaper, stained with dark patches that looked disturbingly like blood. The scent of decay was overpowering, a sickly, sweet odour that clung to my nostrils and made my stomach churn. I stumbled upon a room that seemed untouched by time, a stark contrast to the rest of the decaying house. It was a study filled with books and papers, a large wooden desk dominating the centre of the room. On the desk lay a journal, its pages yellowed with age. The whispers grew louder as I approached, urging me to open it, to uncover the secrets hidden within. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, each one filled with words of love and betrayal, promises made and broken. The journal belonged to a man who'd once lived in the house, a man who had loved deeply and lost everything. His words were filled with anguish, his soul laid bare on the pages. The whispers became more frantic, a cacophony of voices all clamouring to be heard. They spoke of lies and deceit, of a love that had turned to ashes. The man had been betrayed by the one he loved most, and in his despair he had taken his own life within these very walls. The realization hit me like a physical blow, the weight of his sorrow and betrayal pressing down on me. I could feel his pain, his despair, as if it were my own. The house was not just haunted by spirits, but by the echoes of a tragic past. The whispers grew louder still, a deafening roar that filled the room. I could feel the presence of the man, his spirit bound to the house by the weight of his sorrow. He was trapped, unable to move on, his pain and betrayal anchoring him to this place. I closed the journal, the whispers fading to a low murmur. I knew that I had uncovered only a fraction of the house's dark history, and that there were more secrets buried within its walls. The air was thick with the promise of more revelations, more horrors yet to come. But I was determined to uncover the truth, to face the darkness and find a way to free the souls trapped within the house. I left the study, the whispers following me as I moved through the darkened halls. The house was alive and it was watching, but I was ready. I would face the darkness, confront the shadows, and uncover the truth buried within its walls. The night was still, the air heavy with the scent of decay and the promise of more horrors to come. But for now, I had won a small victory. The haunting had only just begun, but I was ready. I would face whatever came next, and I would not be afraid. Echoes of betrayal. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. They spoke of betrayal, of love lost and promises broken. The air was thick with the scent of decay, the walls stained with memories of the past. The house was a tomb, and its secrets were buried deep within its walls. As dawn approached, the house seemed to sigh, its secrets safe for another day. But the haunting was far from over. The spirits were restless, their stories unfinished. The house would wait, its walls echoing with the whispers of the past, ready to ensnare the next soul who dared to enter. The air grew still, almost as if the house itself was taking a breath, preparing for the next chapter in its dark history. The shadows lengthened, merging into one another until the entire house was cast in darkness once more. The whispers subsided, but their presence lingered, a constant reminder of the sorrow and betrayal that had taken place within these walls. The spirits, bound by their unfinished business, roamed the corridors, their ethereal forms barely visible in the dim light. They waited, their stories etched into the very fabric of the house, eager to be heard, to be understood. The house, a silent sentinel, stood ready to reveal its secrets to the next unfortunate soul who crossed its threshold. The haunting was not an event, but a state of being, an unending cycle of sorrow and despair. And so, as the first light of dawn crept through the broken windows, the house settled into a watchful silence, its dark history waiting to be uncovered once more. The spirits, though momentarily subdued, would rise again, their whispers growing louder, their presence more insistent. The house was alive with the echoes of the past, and it would continue to haunt those who dared to seek its secrets. For in this house the past was never truly gone, and the haunting would never truly end. As dawn approached, the house seemed to sigh, its secrets safe for another day. But the haunting was far from over. The spirits were restless, their stories unfinished. The house would wait, its walls echoing with the whispers of the past, ready to ensnare the next soul who dared to enter. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more haunting stories. Your support helps us bring you more spine-tingling content.